Once again, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I am clearly audible to everyone. My name is Tariq Soel, and I am the coordinator for innovation for climate adaptation and resilience, also shortly called as ICARE. On behalf of Asian Disaster Preparedness Center and the ICARE team, I welcome you all in this webinar on scaling the summit, how to expand promising ideas for a widespread impact. This webinar is jointly co-hosted in collaboration with United Nations Global Pulse. We allow me to provide a brief overview of the ICARE. Maybe few of our people might be knowing it. The ICARE, led by the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center with support from the World Bank, aims to foster climate resilience and adaptation innovation by facilitating transformative, affordable, and accessible climate solutions. So far, 23 innovations have successfully tested in South Asian region countries, including Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. These projects utilize advanced technologies like the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, drones, deep learning modules, and automated land use systems. They also include simpler solutions like a smart farming technique and digital system for climate information and analytics. Continuing on the earlier phase of the work supported by Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office FCDO, Government of the United Kingdom, through its program for Asia Resilience to Climate Change, PARCC Trust Fund. The ICARE is supporting 16 innovators to enhance the South Asia region's climate adaptation footprint by piloting 9 new innovations and upscaling 7 earlier tested solutions. The ICARE projects are unique in nature due to the fact that it spreads and covers mostly these following: the common vision among stakeholders, the complementarity among different streams, a platform for networking to leverage resources, knowledge sharing, facilitating access. Today's webinar on scaling the summit, how to expand promising ideas for a widespread impact, is part of the ICARE webinar series that happened during 2022 and 2023. You can also visit the ICARE website for more information on the previous webinar. Friends, today's webinar is also significant due to the very fact that we have a team from UN Global Pulse, which is the UN Secretary General's Innovation Lab, and has been implementing and supporting innovations not only in the UN system but all around the globe. We are happy to have with us today UN Global Pulse team based in Asia and Pacific and Finland, as well as the innovators supported by UN Global Pulse. I am happy to introduce our 3 distinguished guest speakers. We have Ms. Patricia Loh, Senior Analyst, Innovation Scaling, UN Global Pulse, Finland. Just to give a brief of Ms. Patricia Loh, she is a Senior Analyst at UN Global Pulse, the Secretary General's Innovation Lab. She brings together her skill in evidence-based practices and system change to help innovation scale across the UN. Her dedication to understanding real-world needs and outcomes stem from her background in clinical physiotherapy and postgraduate studies in medical law, global health, and development. At the United Nations Global Pulse, Patricia works on the innovation scaling team. The team is responsible for a widespread UN research effort to identify and address key barriers and opportunities to scale innovations, and is currently working on turning the research recommendation into concrete steps to enable innovation scaling. I welcome Patricia. We also have Mr. Faisal Hamreen. Mr. Faisal currently holds the position of Data Innovation Lead at the UN Global Pulse Asia Pacific. Having almost 17 years of experience in information management within the humanitarian and development sectors, his primary objective is to harness humanitarian data to enhance crisis response. Before joining United Nations Global Pulse, Faisal cooperated with various entities, including NGOs, donor agencies, and private sectors. Notably, he served as an information management officer with the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, in Indonesia for over a decade. During this tenure, he held diverse roles, serving as both a team leader and a technical expert, directly handling data and producing information products. He was also an integral part of OCHA's team responding to humanitarian operations across Indonesia, the Philippines, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Faisal has been actively involved in several projects aimed at supporting the development of information system and possesses a wealth of experience in developing training modules tailored for human operations. I once again welcome Mr. Faisal. Joining with us, this is our third speaker, Mr. Casper Stadel. Mr. Casper is a digital agriculture officer at World Food Program. He has over 14 years of experience developing and scaling digital solutions for last-mile beneficiaries in developing countries. He is currently leading the global scale of Farm to Go World Food Program digital solutions to support smallholder farmer program activities. The mobile and web application has active implementation in Mozambique, Rwanda, Uganda, Somalia, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. And it aims to benefit over 1 lakh smallholder farmers by the end of 2025. It's indeed a great achievement. Before I hand over to the guest speaker, I request that if you have all our uh, friends who are joining in, if you have any questions or comments related to the presentation, please write them in the chat box and we will take them at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first guest speaker, Ms. Patricia Lowe, to provide an overview of the United Nations Global Pulse and how it is promoting innovation. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Tariq, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you again to the iCare team for the kind introduction and for the invitation to speak at this webinar here. I'm very, very honored, and also very honored to have colleagues Faisal and Casper alongside as well, who will give much more concrete on-the-ground examples as well. So I would like to share my screen if that's all right, Tariq.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
There we go. How is that for everyone?
It is coming up okay.
Okay. So as Tariq has already briefly mentioned about UN Global Pulse, I will just still go through very, very briefly about what we do, who we are, and give a little bit of insight into the challenges in innovation scaling that we have identified through our research, and also then end with a few snapshots of our Scale Accelerator and how it went. So as Tariq said, we are the Secretary General's Innovation Lab, and our current focus is working on our common agenda and the UN 2.0 Quintet of Change, namely data, digital, innovation, strategic foresight, and behavioral science. And we have expertise in all of these areas. But I'll be I'm working specifically on innovation scaling, so I will be continuing on that thread. So we are a pretty global network with presence in New York and Kampala, and Faisal, who's joining from Jakarta, and I'm based in Helsinki myself. So as just to set the baseline of how we approach innovation and scaling, these are our working definitions of how and that we use to approach innovation and scaling. So for us, we want to see innovation as delivering impact through the creation or adaptation of a product, service, process, or system. So we're not limited to just, for example, any platform or digital product, but we want to kind of broaden our scope to include anything that's a product, a service, process, or a system. But what's important here is that we want to see this innovation add new value by addressing an existing problem or responding to a need. So it needs to be very needs-based. And then for us, it is a very vague definition in some ways, but we want to keep it that way because scaling can mean very different things for many of us. But it's about maximizing that potential that the innovation can have on impact. So those are the two working definitions that we've used so far within UN Global Pulse. And just to give you an example of an innovation management system and why we think it needs to be needs-based is that for us, when I will be talking about the Scale Accelerator and the scaling challenges at some point, you will see that we are always looking for already piloted innovations. And they should essentially have gone through the first few steps of this. It needs to have already identified the needs and so to give it a substance of why, and then do a bit of research and frame the innovation, and then you could either adapt or prototype a new PSP, product, service, or process, and then you have piloted it before you try and transition to scale. And the reason why is we ask for several pilots is for it to have already tested the hypothesis and generated enough evidence to, I suppose, validate that it is actually trying to answer, it is answering the hypothesis that it has set out to answer, and that it works. And that will give it its best chance to scale. So that is just an example of an innovation management system, and it is adapted from, for this one here, it's adapted from the Humanitarian Innovation Guide by ELRA. So how do we support innovation scaling in the UN system, and why, like again, Tariq mentioned, we did a research project that looked at the opportunities and barriers across the UN system on innovation scaling, like why is it so hard to scale innovation? And we identified that there was a lot of innovation going on within the UN, but there was also more need for support. So it came up with 3 recommendations. First one is to deepen current good practices. So there is a lot of good practices on how to innovate, how to help to scale innovation, but let's try and deepen it and spread the word better. So we then, after following this recommendation, formed a group within the UN Innovation Network, and we'll share the link later to join to that community of practice, and that essentially just brings practitioners together to share knowledge, share opportunities, and deepen current good practices. And then secondly, which is broaden support to scale innovation, and that's the area where we're focusing most of our attention to with the UN Global Pulse Scale Accelerator, is essentially to try and make support for scaling more available and more broadly across the UN system. And finally, expanding horizons for innovation capabilities, which is still, like the word suggests, it's in our horizon. We need to try and expand other opportunities, like looking at are there any new financial instruments that can help scale, support innovation scaling. So that's still being discovered and explored, but at the moment, deepening and broadening support to scale is taking up most of our work within UN Global Pulse. So following the research, we then also developed a primer with the 5 main questions that we think would be important for any innovators to ask themselves, or anyone who want to support innovations to scale. Is, should it be scaled at all? What is the scale vision? So what is it trying to set out to do in the long term? Is it ready to scale? Is the team or organization able to support it to scale? And then also, does it have an ecosystem in place to help it to scale? And this will make a little bit more sense in the next few slides as I go through the curriculum that we address in the Scale Accelerator. So we developed this UN Global Pulse Scale Accelerator to broaden support to scale across the UN system, and it provides hands-on guidance for UN innovation teams to develop customized scale strategies. So customized in the sense that it needs to be for their innovation, the needs of their innovation. And it also then provides grants and dedicated mentoring to help them implement this scaling strategy. And And this is a snapshot of what the teams that went through the accelerator would have gone through. So they had 6 workshops. First one is a scale panorama workshop, which helps them identify what their scale goals are. So what would you like to achieve with your innovation within the first 12 to 36 or the next 12 to 36 months? And then the scale vision, what is your long-term 10-year plan? What is that? What does that impact look like? Then we go through several workshops to stress test the solution, to stress test their organization or team, and then also help with finding and forming what we call the value network. So their partners and the ecosystem in place around their innovation that would help them to scale. And then finally, in the workshop, the last workshop, they presented their strategy, which essentially highlights the gaps that they would have identified in the stress testing workshops and the value network finding and forming workshops. And then the action points that they want to take to address those gaps, and that makes up their strategy. So as I mentioned before, we help them through stress testing the solution and their organization and value network. And these are the 3 main elements that we think are quite important to address when you're looking at how to scale your innovation. So for your solution, we help them think through what their value proposition is, what evidence do you have, and how are you collecting that evidence of how your innovation works, how adoptable is it, how replicable is it, and the elements again of how you can make that adoptable and replicable. Intellectual property treatment, if there's anything that's applicable, and what's the life cycle of your innovation. So what happens after you, or will it stay with you, or does it need to go to someone else? And then next one, the organization stress test. So it's not a solo act, but here organization doesn't mean the organization that you work in only, but it also talks about your team. First, organizational models. Like, is your organization actually the right one for scaling this innovation, or does it need to go to someone else? And then the capability model. Do you have the right skill sets within your team to scale this? And then the financial model, again, if that's applicable, like what are the revenue streams that you might need to consider to help this scale? And then finally, we talk about value networks. And this is taken from the Scaling Value Playbook, and it's by Ian Gray and John Besson, who we've worked with on the workshops. And it introduces your partners in a slightly different way. And we talk about them in 9 roles. And it's about the value that they bring. So they can also play the role of creator of the value, captor of the value, and then the ones that consume the value. So they're all slightly different. And then who are the ones that convey and move your value, who then coordinate your value and channel it with just as a channel on its own, but doesn't have actually anything to do with the value. And then we talk through who might be your competitors, who might actually bring similar value and be your competitor. Who are the cartographers? So who are the ones that write the rules with which your value needs to sit in, and who might complement your value that your innovation brings. And a partner can be in any of these roles at any time, and they can change through the life cycle of your innovation as it takes on scaling as well. So that is the curriculum, and I've condensed, I think, about more than 12 hours, 18 hours of workshops into a few slides. But just to finish off with a snapshot of our first ever cohort of the UN Global Pulse Scale Accelerator, we had about 70 applications. And of those, 7 teams from the UN system were selected, of which there were 5 UN agencies represented with 35 participants. And after the workshops, the scale strategies were reviewed by a 5-person panel, which involved donors and people from academia. and 3 grant recipients were selected, which one of them was Casper's innovation. So that is all from me. If you'd like to find out more, we'll be happy to share the links to this. The first one is the research. The second one is the primer with the 5 questions. And then the third is an introduction of the first cohort. And as I mentioned, we've got the innovation scaling group and the podcast that also came out from the UN innovation scaling group work that you can listen to, that covers a lot of the topics that I have also covered in the Scale Accelerated curriculum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much. It was very informative and very wonderful presentation. And I mean, we will come back to you with the questions, but just to give a gist, you said there are 5 key questions, and then there are 6 workshop and 9 value network roles. This sounds like the numbers are in such a way that one must keep in mind that these are the certain of the things. And you also mentioned that 16 hours of workshop. So when an innovator just thinks that doing it in a short or a small bit, it's not possible. You have to show the dedication that this long, this much of hours are included into one workshop. So I can imagine what is going to be the innovators who are on the path to scale up. Thank you so much. Thank you. So now I would like to invite our second speaker, Mr. Faisal Tharmi, Data Innovation and Policy Lead, United Nations Global Pulse, to present his presentation. Over to you, Faisal.
Thank you so much, Tariq, and thank you, Patricia, also for the intro. So let me share my screen.
You can share that. Thank you.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can see the screen. I hope everybody is also able to see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as Patricia mentioned, my name is Faisal. I'm a data innovation and policy lead from the UN Global Pulse Space in Jakarta. So today I will present one of the projects that currently we are running in Jakarta as a part of the global projects within the UN Global Pulse Network, which is ideally talking about data and AI that related to humanitarian and social needs. Okay, so let's start with a bit of intro. So what you see in the slide now is basically the project map of the UN Global Pulse Asia Pacific. So you can see that there are some similarity, but also some difference related to the way how we're doing projects on innovations and also data analytics in the different part of the region within the Asia Pacific region. So some of the parts were done quite really a lot, and some parts basically not really so much. But what we learned from that kind of experience is basically, as you can see, that there's a diversity across the demographics of the countries. There's a cultural, social, economic background, and there's quite a lot of challenges in terms of related to infrastructures, resources, and regulatory frameworks. So it's always the lessons that we learn through the experience working with the different countries, with the different projects. You always need to adapt to the local context. The second one is basically, while there is success story in the way how we replicate different projects in different countries, there's also some sort of like a challenge that we need to facing when we start to scaling, either related to the way how the data is not available, or the regulation that it needs to be adapted to different contexts. So that's kind of a part of this is how sometimes we're facing different challenge in different contexts. And then when you do this type of scaling innovation, or you try to replicate innovation in different setups, there's always, you need to do in strategic approach to make sure that you'll be able to overcome the challenge and ensure the wider impact. So this is how the intro, to make sure that there's a different way on how we do things. It's not always as easy as it is, but there's always needs to be adapted based on the local context, based on the country kind of different context with demography and other stuff. So this is some of the lessons that we learned, that scaling innovation is always challenging, and then there's the diverse, the complex environment also sometimes make it the challenge become more greater, but the impact is always really good to see. Now, what I will discuss today, it's basically specific only for one project, which is what we call Data Insight for Social and Humanitarian Actions, which is called DISA. So this is there's a two what they call use case that we built for the DISA one. One is basically called social economy mapping, which is SEM, and the other one is damage assessment. But I'm only go through, because of the time, it's only specific focusing on explain a bit related to what is the social economy mapping that we're doing in right now. So DISA is basically the UN Global Pulse led coalition of partners working on responsibility leverage data and AI for humanitarian and social needs. So within the ecosystem of the DISA, there is what we call the responsible AI partners, which is mostly a tech expertise. So in this case, we have a Quantum Lab as a part of the AI by McKinsey, we have Jane Family Institute, and then we have the data providers, where it's basically agencies or partners that provide us with the data that we'll be able to use to do some analysis related to humanitarian and social needs. And then we have funders and delivery partners, which is resource and advisory. We have a Google.org, McKinsey & Company, and also Atticnic, JMA Government. And we have the humanitarian organization, which is provide us with the feedback. This is one of the key important aspects within the DISA platform, because they are the one that use the solutions or innovation that we build, but also provide us with feedback as they are the domain experts that will be able to advise us what will be the best, what is the best needs, that what kind of things that will be able to provide them that will have a bigger impact in terms of the projects that we're running. Now, within the social economy mapping or SEM, currently we're running a pilot project in Philippines with the data partner, which is coming from one of the telco called Globe. And then we have a different kind of user workshop participants, which is the idea is basically to engage with different partners. So what you see here is not only for the Philippines, but also for Indonesia, as we are currently exploring the possibility of introducing this tool also in Indonesia. And the data source basically coming mostly from the telco data, which is in the case of Philippines is the Globe, and for Indonesia we are still discussing with one of the telco, and then we are using also the national census data. So what we're trying to do is basically within the DISA is provide an information that will be able to fill the gap on the early days of the disaster. So in most cases when the disaster happens, one of the things that is really important for the humanitarian organization when they respond to emergency is basically to identify where's the pocket of displaced population, or where the population move after the area is impacted by disaster. This type of information usually provided by the humanitarian agencies or also by the government in the early days of the disaster. But we're seeing there's quite a lot of this type of big emergencies that not only affected the community or the population, but also the government itself. So sometimes there is a delay in terms of how this type of situational awareness information will be able to share among humanitarian agencies. So these are trying to fill this type of gap. So the innovation kind of aspects that we're looking into it, how much we'll be able to use a telco data to be able to provide humanitarian agencies in terms of the almost near real-time data in terms of where they will be able to see the population located after the disaster, where people move, how much information or inflow and outflow related to the certain area within the affected districts or municipalities in the context of the disaster. So this is how DISA is trying to fill the gap related to the humanitarian and social needs. Now, I was asking today to basically talk a bit on our experience within the DISA teams when we talk about how to scaling innovation to have an impact on. So the DISA approach, it's basically, there's 4 aspects that we're looking into. The first one is basically we're talking about focus on user-centric design. So when we develop DISA in countries like the Philippines, and now we are scoping for the Indonesian one, we always do by using co-creation. So we engaging directly with the user for the design process. So while we already have a thematic area, which is we are doing population movement, we are doing poverty nowcasting, but the way how this type of information or insights that will be produced by poverty nowcasting, even the population movement, it's something that we discuss with the user. So we'll tailor the needs of the user, but also based on the context of the situation on the ground. So Philippine case and Indonesian case, while we are still looking into where's population move, we try to identify as much as possible what kind of aspects that's really important for them to understand. Is it necessary to have complete information related to where they go and where they're coming from or something like that? So this is something that we are going through as a part of co-creations with the partner. We also establish what we call user feedback loops, which is allow us to have a continuously improve the DISA tool. So even after we develop the system, we already have the system in place. We have a kind of a regular meetings with the user, try to understand what is the issues that they're facing when they try to use the tool, what kind of things that we'll be able to improve. So as much as possible, we are focusing on to make sure that the user it's become the centric of the design of what we build. The second one, we are building scalable solutions. So as much as possible, the systems that we build is a modular one. So ideally, we'll be able to adapt it context by context, but also at the same time, we're trying to make sure that this is in open source. So ideally, later on, the adaptations on the wider community, or if the community would like to engage more or to become partner of the DISA one, they will be able to do so. So this is something that we are also make sure as a part of the process of this approach in terms of innovation. And then we're leveraging technology for scalability. So this is important now with the now digital age, when people start to talk about cloud computing platforms and stuff like that. We're trying as much as possible to make sure that what we build is basically leveraging cloud computing platform by design user-friendly dashboard through the co-creation, create visualization that easy to understand, easy to read, but also to do some data analysis and interpretations that it's useful for stakeholders, something that is easy to understand, easy to digest by the community or by the people to using it. So it's easy later on for us if we would like to make sure that we'll be able to scale the system itself. The fourth one is basically promoting sustainability and impact, because this is quite important as a part of the long-term solutions for the DISA, because while we're showcasing the success story, we're also trying to attract more user, more kind of also people to use the platform itself. So we will start thinking also when we start to develop how will be the clear exit strategy for us to make sure that if it's needed and we will be able to do transition of the ownership of the local stakeholder, we'll be able to do it effectively. Now, when we talk about the barriers of the scaling innovation, I mean, especially when we talk about data analytics or create information system, there's always a challenge. One of the challenges that we also quite a lot hear about it is basically sometimes there's a cultural resistance. I mean, some government institutions, they still rely so much on the what they call official data sets, which is data that needs to come from the government or data that needs to be validated. It's not crowdsourcing one or something that it's basically they can trace back where the information coming from. There's a validation, there's a ground truth kind of checking. So this type of things, it's always a challenge, but this is not, but you need to be able to understand, or you need to speak within the language to make sure that they understand that what we're trying to do is also have a benefit or have the value of the impact that they would like to see. So this is something that's really important when you build some sort like a data-driven systems or solutions. The second one is the data access and quality. quality. This is always a challenge. So people keep asking, where is the reliable and the clean data? How will we be able to use this kind of thing? So this is why we apply different technology, like we build AI model to make sure that while we'll make sure that we have kind of reliable and clean data through the systems, is also we are ensuring data privacy and ethical access can be preserved in a way to make sure that it's safe to be used. So this is something, a process that we're going through also by doing risk assessment. We're talking with the different domain expertise to understand better how this type of data can be used and what is the risk related to the way how misuse of the data. And then sustainability and the funding. This is, I think most of you already understand that securing long-term financial resources, it's a challenge one. So this is a part of the process on how we'll be able to see what is the challenge and how we'll be able to address this type of aspects. And then one of the aspects that I think Pat mentioned previously is related to the resources itself, really. So within the DISA teams now, we're trying as much as possible to make sure that we have people in place with the necessary skill to be able to support the data analytics, to build the AI implementation, project management. So when it's time for us to do a lot of transferring knowledge and stuff like that, we'll be able to do that. So this is quite important. So through the process, like I mentioned before, we'll try also to understand how much or how possible we can be adapted to the context itself. So usually when we do a project like innovation data, build the platforms from the different partner, the first question that we have is basically what type of technology that we have or what type of infrastructure that we have within your system. So as much as possible, we try to adapt and to make sure that within the adaptation process that we've done, it's still replicable, it's still scalable in a sense for us to be able to make sure that there is sustainability for the future. Now, this is one of the things that we always try to overcome the challenge that we're facing when we do this type of projects. So for the DISA itself, the communicate of value proposition, it's very important. There's a lot of systems out there. There's a lot of initiative already been done out there, but we need to communicate properly that what is our value proposition, and this is important. If you'll be able to do that, then people will be able to see the value of your system, and this is something that now we are seeing from the DISA part, that people see the value, because to be able to access telco data is not easy. And even if you have access to the data, I think the second part is basically the question how you will be able to use it. You need to have a specialized skill expertise to be able to do that. So this is the value proposition that we'll communicate with the user, and then also with the broader community. So they understand that what we propose in here is something that is quite valuable for them to be able to use it. And then, like I said, we have a quite strong teams now. DISA team is growing. We have more people coming in to be able to do product lead kind of a process. We also have now tech lead that will be coming to make sure that we will try to assess the whole concept related to the new technology that keep coming. We are doing quite a lot of pilot and iterate one. So the success story that we have within the Philippines now, we'll try to replicate, but also try to adapt within the context in Indonesia, and as much as possible, the foster of the culture of innovation. So we're trying to start to create the environment to encourage creativity, risk-taking, and collaboration, because this is quite important. I mean, sometimes the hardest steps to do innovation is basically to make sure that you take the risk and you try to make sure that you collaborate with different partners, because this is quite wide area. So this is kind of the challenge that we're trying to overcome by make sure that this type of things it's been done. What's next? I mean, this is mostly related to the presentation on how we're doing scaling innovation, but if you'd like to know more related to the DISA one, this is one of my colleague, which is the senior partnership analyst, Rain Sudamara. She will be able to explain you more related to the DISA program, and feel free to be in touch and ask and visit our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faizan. Thank you so much. I mean, maybe you might have heard about DISA, DISHA in Indian word, in Hindi. Right. So, I mean, just taking it from there, DISA exactly means to give direction. And
Yeah.
then to give direction, the whole concept of presenting in is actually you have given a direction to all our innovators or potential innovations, how they can scale up. So your presentation and your innovation terming at DISA is well connected. We'll come back to you with more questions on it. But a few of the key points that we have used is that I have used, I've taken it from, and to also to the audience, they might have some questions on it. AI used for scaling up. I mean, at times when this entire world is almost lurking on to the AI technology, I'm sure that innovation is not left behind with using that AI. And you already mentioned, Fazal, that all the things are there, the data sets are there, but how you want to use it, you must have some technology over there. So if we don't prepare those technologies right at this moment, so the future we will be like left behind. So this is one of the important aspects. Another important aspect you mentioned about the coordination and collaboration across the geography. The scale up does not mean that it will just be into one particular geography of the world. The same thing can be needed into the developed world or also into the developing country or maybe the underdeveloping country. So this scaling up will definitely cross the barriers. When and how it remains an question to all our innovators that way, whether they can take it over there or not. And then you already mentioned that in during the disaster scenario and the post-disaster scenario, the socio-economic mapping. Earlier we used to have this word with HRVA, but now this socio-economic mapping, these are one of the key important aspects that innovators must take into consideration. It is not only their one particular product that they want to scale up, but what impact that scale up is going to take with the SEM mapping, socioeconomic mapping, we will be able to know. Thank you so much, Fazal. Now I would like to invite Mr. Casper to present his presentation, and then Mr. Casper is the Digital Agricultural Officer at the United Nations World Food Program. Over to you, Mr. Casper, and I welcome you all once again.
Thank you, Tariq, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Yeah, like Tariq said, I'm Casper. I work for the World Food Program as the Digital Agriculture Officer, and I'm based in South Africa. So today I'm going to tell you about Farm2Go, which is a solution that was, as Pat mentioned, that went through the Scale Up Accelerator program at the UN Global Pulse. So I'm just going to share my screen and get this presentation going. Okay, so the problem, or let's say the challenge that smallholder farmers have all over the world is that they are struggling to access markets that prioritize fair and transparent transactions. In other words, smallholder farmers tend to get taken advantage of whenever they want to sell their produce. This is especially a problem for female smallholder farmers who are getting discriminated against at local markets, and they can't get the same price as their male counterparts. Now, at WFP, we have programs in place to support smallholder farmers, and these programs are designed by let's say policy experts and people who have the knowledge of how to support smallholder farmers, but we didn't have a digital solution that can help us monitor and evaluate the impact of these interventions. So what we did is we developed Farm2Go. It's an internally developed solution, and it's a platform to support the implementation and monitoring of smallholder farmer activities. And why we're saying it's a platform, to support smallholder farmer activities in general is because we know that the main problem we're trying to solve is market access. But once we've solved that, we have a lot of other programs that can support smallholder farmers, not just with market access, but access to information, access to finance, access to credit, access to quality inputs. So there's a wide variety of use cases we can start to address. But for any innovation, it doesn't help to start with a big bang and try to solve all of the problems. For us, it was important to focus on the first problem at hand, and that's the market access for smallholder farmers, and then to really understand that problem and try to solve all of the different adjacent problems to it. So if I give you a quick explanation of what the digital marketplace is. So Farm2Go, the solution, is not an application or a smartphone solution that is used by smallholder farmers. So the smallholder farmers are not actual users. We don't expect them to have access to smartphones, but they are participants. So they are very important role players in the system. The smallholder farmers are represented by the farmer organizations or cooperatives. And the technical term is an aggregator. So it's an organization or a structure that's in place to aggregate produce from smallholder farmers and basically formalize their dealings with local buyers. So the aggregators, they have access to the smartphone application Farm2Go, and they use this to register their farmers, create the profiles of the farmers, and then to also record the collections, what produce they are receiving from the farmers. And this creates a little bit of a stock inventory on the mobile app. And then the buyers, they have access to a web application, and they can see all of the available produce at the different farmer organizations. And these buyers are typically buyers that WFP already has a relationship with, or that WFP actually procures from for our own distribution of aid, or they could be schools. And this is a new use case I can talk about later a little bit more, but we want to support schools through our homegrown school feeding program, where they are buying directly from local cooperatives. Anyway, so the buyers, they use their web application to make offers and negotiate the prices of the commodities that they want to buy. And once both parties agree in this very formalized way of connection, we then also ask the aggregators to record the details of the exchange, and then that is linked to a specific farmer who deposited their commodities at the aggregation center, and we can then also prompt them to pay that farmer. So with all of these steps, we now have access to the data. The problem that we had in the past with our program implementations is that, yes, we were supporting smallholder farmers with access to the market, but we didn't have access to data to help us inform our program decision making. So now we have access to the data, and a new feature we introduced recently is a training component where WFP, based on the access to the data, we can now share some best practices with the farmer organizations that they can then access the content and train their farmers on. So this is like the very basic of it. I'm not going to go into a full-on demo right now, but I wanted to just, because this is a webinar about climate resilience also, I wanted to show you how we're also using Farm2Go now to share climate smart content with farmer organizations. And we've got this info hub that the WFP managers have access to, and they can then create content and share that directly with farmer organizations. So this is something that we're going to start implementing in some of the countries that we're already operating in, and want to see what is the difference this climate smart content is making to the yields of the farmers over time. So you can imagine if we share the content and we know which farmers have been trained on the content, then we can see, okay, what is the impact on their yields over time? Okay, so I want to give you a few examples of where we have implemented Farm2Go, and just talk about some of the lessons learned, because when scaling an innovation, like Pat said earlier, is you need to have some pilots, you need to understand what is working, what is not working, what can you improve on. Here we started in Rwanda, and I'm showing a colleague, Pascal, who's got a paper-based book that the aggregation centers used to use for their record keeping. And Agnes, the farmer leader who's using the Farm2Go application, she said that the biggest benefit for her was actually just having a search function on her application. So to search a farmer's details, then to update it and add deposits to it. That's like almost an unintended benefit we didn't even think of. And this is it just shows you the difference digital makes in users' lives. But then it's also important to have these stories to understand what are the key factors that are benefiting the users, and this comes through user research. So now what we did in Rwanda, they had a very successful implementation, and they did an evaluation. And this is important to use in your scaling journey to really just generate that evidence that a solution has been tested. This was the hypothesis at the time. And now that we've implemented it for 6 months, what is the difference? One of the challenges we've had is we didn't really have baseline data because digital is new, and it's something that they haven't used a digital solution before, so they don't have that baseline data of what was the situation before the digital solution was implemented. So what we did is we did the user interviews to really get the qualitative data from them, and as part of this review, we established that Farm2Go is really on the right track. And then we took that evidence and we presented it to our own internal management, and we got their endorsement to now scale up Farm2Go to other country offices. And why we wanted to scale it up to other country offices is because we know that our programs that are supporting smallholder farmers all have the same indicators, the same reports that we have to submit to our donors. And if we can build a solution that is not just a project in a specific country, but a product that can be used in multiple countries, then we will be able to share learnings between country offices. We can standardize the requirements and standardize the reporting. But then more importantly, is we can share the cost between country offices. As you know, like developing a solution for one specific country office would mean that you would have to invest all of the maintenance and the improvements just in that one project. But now that we're sharing it between the country offices, we are essentially making it more affordable for country offices to use this. Okay, so this is Rwanda, and then we also went to Mozambique. In Cox's Bazar, we started very small, and they started with 3 aggregators, also learned a lot of lessons. We saw that the application, the way we designed it, won't always work in their context. So we then took their feedback and built new features that would make it applicable in many other country contexts also. So specifically with fresh produce. So originally the application was more for dry goods or like beans and maize aggregation, but in Asia specifically, we saw that the fresh produce is something that we also need to make available, and this has made a big impact in the way that it's implemented in Cox's Bazar. And then we went to the Philippines and started the implementation there at the end of last year. And then in Somalia, where we trained the local staff, and we follow like the trainers program where it's important that the local country office can take ownership of the solution, so then they can support it locally. And here we had the trainers activity. And then another angle that we are looking at is, before we implement, we actually go to a country office and see if it is a solution that we can get buy-in from the users. So in April, we went on mission in Cuba, and we went and met with farmer organizations. We met with local schools and government stakeholders, and we showed how the solution can work for them. And then we generated that interest. So now there's a demand from the user side to have the application implemented there. And then from there, we will also explore how a handover to the government will work. In Cuba, it will be the first example of where we start the implementation specifically with handover in mind, because the government wants to take ownership of the solution, and they don't have local or private sector alternatives. So the lessons that we're going to learn here is actually something that we're then going to implement across the board for Farm2Go to then also make it a solution that we can hand over in other country contexts. And then we went to Uganda, and in Uganda, again, it was a great experience where during the training, we had some of the cooperatives and local buyers who gave their feedback as we did the training, and we're now going to adjust a few things in the application that will be relevant to all of our implementations, just to show that good faith that it's a solution for everyone. It's not just something that WFP is forcing on farmer organizations. Okay, so just want to give you the context of Farm2Go and our scale goal. So the context in WFP is that we have 44 country offices with more than 1.3 million smallholder farmers in 2023 that participated in our activities aimed at improving the efficiency and inclusiveness of the targeted value chain. So this means there is a huge demand from country offices, and it means that we have the opportunity to scale within WFP, but we need the evidence. We need the reference cases of Farm2Go actually working in other country offices before we can move to all 44. So with our implementations, we're learning. Like I said, in Uganda, we just had an example of improvements that we can make, and then we're taking those learnings and then presenting it to new country offices where we could potentially scale up to. Then the adoption, we've seen some good results in the country offices that we've implemented thus far. We're close to 14,000 farmer profiles registered and supported in these country offices, but it's still early days. It's still relatively small implementations. And in these country offices, we always start small, but then we scale up to more users. But our scale goal is that we want to reach 100,000 smallholder farmers in 10 countries by the end of 2025. So we've got some way to go still. We're in 6 countries at the moment. We hope to be in 10 countries by next year, and then reach 100,000 farmers. So even the countries that we're in now, we want to scale up and reach more farmers. And then our scale vision is for the next 10 years, we want to be the leading UN digital solution to support smallholder farmer program activities. And it's for 2 million farmers. So with the evidence that we're generating within our own implementations, we can then expand our value network to other UN organizations that are doing the same thing. And then I just wanted to finish off by giving this example of where we have shown that Farm2Go is really making a difference in female farmers' experience. In Bangladesh, there was a podcast by the BBC where they interviewed a female farmer called Poppy, and she explained how by accessing the digital marketplace, she now can sell her produce at a higher profit. So the difference it is making in her life is that she can now compete with her male counterparts. And these are like the kind of stories when you scale in innovation. Yes, it's nice to have the big numbers of we've reached 100,000 farmers and all that, but that doesn't really tell you what difference it's making on the ground. So this is the kind of stories that you need to focus on to really convey the message. Okay, thank you very much. I'll stop here and then we can go ahead with some questions.
Thank you so much, Caspar, and it was indeed very informative. And in a true sense, when you are saying that UN not only covers the entire region, you said about countries like Somalia, Uganda, Bangladesh, Philippines, and also representation in Cuba. That indeed tells a lot. We will come back to you with the questions, but one of the few of the important key takeaways was, as you mentioned, that women and men are completely in a different tone when earning their livelihoods. And your Farm2Go has helped them somehow so that the market access to them will be much equally, will be much equal. And then coming on to the farmer and the aggregator, everyone, everywhere, the market dominations are like that only. The farmer wants more produce, the aggregator also wants more money, and in turns, both gets benefited. This is one of the, I understand this is one of the very important aspects of this Farm2Go one. Another important aspect that you already mentioned about the digital access, when you informed about that how a woman with the use of the digital mobile app is now able to use the search option. So when you are giving this privilege to people or access to people about the digital one, we never know that how they will use it for their own livelihood or in their own life for their betterment. So this is indeed a great thing. And I truly understand that this will, wherever it is working in, it will definitely go leaps and bounds. And also onto the indicators, you correctly mentioned from a perspective of monitoring and evaluation, all innovations or all kind of projects, those are going on. If we have set indicators and the targets, then at the end of any of the project, to assess those situations, if the indicators and the targets are set at the very beginning, from the M&E perspective, what we understand that the project is on a very successful note. The project ends with a very successful note. So these are a few of the key important takeaways. I once again request all our listeners, all our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat box. And now we will come with the question and answer session. And then we will, one by one, we would like to get the insight from our distinguished speakers. So this question is for Ms. Patricia. What are the most effective strategies for scaling innovation in diverse and complex environments, especially in the context of South Asian region countries? When we are talking about this question, we keeping in mind that the South Asian region, but here what Casper already mentioned that the access to these innovations and also Faisal also mentioned that access to these innovations is not limited to one particular geography. So we would like to get some insight on that. Over to you, Patricia.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question. There is a bit of a indirect answer to that as well. First of all, most effective strategies, there is no one strategy. It's all very innovation related. So it's about what your innovation needs and what the vision and the goals need. So for example, Casper's Farm to Go strategy might very well be quite different from, say, Disha's strategy as well. But if I can just go back to the main things, the three main things that we think that innovations and innovators need to look at is how is your solution? How robust is your solution? Try and walk through the gaps or any gaps that you might have and might identify along the way with your solution. And that's where a lot of the pilots would come in handy. So as you pilot, you collect information, you collect evidence, you monitor and evaluate it, and you iterate and improve on that. Try and look at the gaps. And then what are your action points in addressing those gaps in your solution as well? So again, going back to how is your value proposition? What evidence do you have and how you're collecting it? Do you need to make it adoptable? By who and how? Is it replicable? Does it need to be replicable? By who and how? And then also thinking about the whole life cycle. But before even all of that as well, is it needs to be needs-based. It should be a solution that it shouldn't be a solution looking for a problem. And I think that's kind of the key thing as well when you do approach your strategy. And then looking at your organization, do you have the right people in your team to do it? Do you have the right buy-in from your senior management, from your organization? Is it set up properly to help you take this forward beyond what you've got at the moment in the pilot? And then finally, the people around you. And when I say people, it's really your value network. And it can be people, it can be physical or digital entities. What do they bring? What do you need them for? And who do you need when? What roles do they play? Again, going back to the 9 value roles. For now, they might play this particular role in creating the value for you, but later on, they might be the ones that are going to be your cartographers that actually decide how your value is going to be formed. So that's all very fluid as well. And all these 3 elements should be the starting point in how you approach your strategy. And like I said, again, there's no one method or one way, but it's just how we approach, how we support innovation teams in approaching their strategies is also, it's about not telling them what they need to do, but more, have you thought of this? Have you thought of A? Have you thought of B? And then paint that big picture of, does this then help you reach that vision and that goal that you want to achieve with your innovation? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. We are having some questions from the audience, but we will take it at a later stage. But now the second question will be, what are the, this question is open for Casper. What are the common barriers to scaling innovations and how can innovators overcome these challenges? As you already mentioned that the farm to go when you had started it and then how people take it and then You already mentioned that one particularly in Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, was also already interviewed and with the aggregator and all, with BBC and all. So, I mean, some of the some we do understand that the barriers to are not known. When we start it, we don't know that what will be actually the barriers. And into the context when we are talking about these countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and all, where women folk and men folk they work together, but there is a great disparity in the earnings that they earn. So these common challenges, and you can also elaborate the common barriers to scaling innovation and how can innovators overcome these challenges. Over to you.
Thanks, Tariq. I almost want to say the most common one is funding, but it's not always just funding, because funding will come if you have a proper business case, if you have a proper sustainability model. So you shouldn't always just think, oh, the biggest barrier is that I don't have funding, and that's why we're not scaling. I would say you need to look at the environment. You need to look at the channels that you are using, and the partnerships that you rely on to make an innovation successful in a specific context. So what we do is, I would say, for Farm2Go specifically, we would evaluate if there is a certain level of digital literacy amongst the users. So we first check, do they have smartphones, and then do they have access to the internet, and then what is their digital literacy? If a user doesn't have a smartphone, then they can't use Farm2Go. So then that's the biggest non-starter almost. So we evaluate that, and then we also then see that sometimes you have to be flexible in the way that you implement it. So maybe in some cases, the user that have been identified to be registered as the Farm2Go user, they are not necessarily the right person to use the system. So you would have to say, okay, let's rather look at a younger user who has used a smartphone before. So that, and then I think one problem that I've seen is that people think that if they introduce an app, that will solve all of their issues on the ground. But the reality is the app is only as good as the people behind it and the people supporting it. So what we've identified as a key way to make Farm2Go scalable in new country offices is that we have to invest in a local adoption manager, somebody who can manage and support the implementation from the start, and they should then basically take ownership of the scaling journey in the country office. Without that person driving the adoption, we've seen that it sometimes is too much for the other colleagues who have a lot of other responsibilities, and they don't get to also support Farm2Go. So you have to kind of evaluate the environment and adjust your implementation plan based on that.
Thank you, Keshav. Thank you for this insight. And I truly understand that when you are talking about certain these questions and how the perception and when we start exactly at the ground, these are quite different. And in the ground, when you already gave an example that if you don't have a smartphone, how will you use the technology? Together with that, so the importance with one, the smartphone may not be required when we are out in our homes or maybe in our fields. But when we come into a platform where the very basic need is a smartphone, then the urgency will definitely come up. Thank you for this insight. So the third question we would like to take up, it is from one of our innovators, and I understand Fazal would be suitable to answer this. One of our innovators, Denon, having been done in Bhutan, they have leveraged Earth observation, artificial intelligence, and data fusion to map climate change. When they have implemented the products and solutions for development and projects for government in Australia, they have noticed an increasing fear of artificial intelligence. For each implementation, there is a lot of sensibilization and about responsible AI and what AI means and how we use it. Do you encounter the same tendency as well? Over to you, Kaza. Or do you want me to repeat the question? I can repeat it for you.
No, I think I can see it from the chat. Thank you so much.
Chat box, right. Thank you.
So, I mean, so I've done quite a bit of sessions now related to AI in different discussions and panel. And I think most of the question that I usually receive is basically when people ask, will the AI replace the human? This is most of the question that I always get. I mean, this in our case, I mean, the way how we've done, like I explained before, so we do a risk assessment, and I do understand that sometimes it's quite when you see the results that coming out from this type of process, there's a lot of questions related to how the process is done, how as much as possible these things, the technique that AI used to be able to come with this type of conclusion. But this is something that I think is as much as possible when we do a project, especially related to quite complex kind of machine learning and AI. It's always as much as possible. We need to be able to explain it in a more kind of a non-expert language, because I think this is quite important. I know sometimes we are reaching out to the different user with the different level of expertise, but the way how we use, I think, as much as possible in most of our projects related to the AI and data analytics, I think to make sure that we have open communications, that we make sure that the objective, the process, and the outcomes that we talk about it's basically quite transparency for the whole user to be able to understand. So, for example, within the DISA, we have what we call a presentation related to the limitation of the models that we build to machine learning and AI. This is something that we always presented to the people to make sure that they understand that there's a limitation on how these things will be able to be done. Also, at the same time, I guess it's also coming back to the way on how when you do quite a lot of this data, I think it's important, especially when we're dealing with the huge big data like this. I think the stakeholder engagement, try to involve stakeholder, but also to get feedback mechanisms in place. I think it's quite important, because sometimes this kind of what you call increasing of the fear of AI, it's coming in the way that they not really understand the system itself, but it's also when they provide feedback, you'll be able to understand what is the concern and how you'll be able to start to build the advocacy, education kind of message related to how people should be able to understand better the system. So it's always a different approach in the way how we do this. But for the DISA itself, we're speaking related to the example that I previously mentioned. I think as much as possible, we also do quite a lot of homework. So there's a technical part. We'll do a lot of going through the models that we built through the machine learning and AI to be able to have a better kind of advocacy methods and transparency on how we explain this process to be done. But also on the other part, we're also doing a lot of risk management. So we have another team that basically looking into this type of aspects to make sure that we can explain, we can advocate that this is kind of risk management. This is about the ethical kind of things that we've done. But also at the same time, I think I mentioned in my presentation, the case study and success story. This is something that also sometimes is quite important to people to be able to understand, to be able to hear, so they know exactly that while there's a pro and cons related to how this system is built, there's always kind of things that they need to be taking into consideration. I hope that answered the question, because it's something that I think most of these technical people that dealing with AI currently is facing now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And truly, you mentioned that with this technology and then leveraging it, innovators have to be mindful what exactly is going on in this present context, whether it is AI or something new, what is coming up. Now, as Patricia already mentioned, that there is no effective strategy to achieve this success. So truly, when we are onto the ground, we will able to know that this thing will suit at this particular geographic location or this particular aspect. But whereas in the same scenario cannot be replicated. So we need to modify whether this modification is with the use of technology or with our own human brain. But in order to get it scaled up, we need to find out those solutions. Thank you so much, Pastor, once again. Now the next question is with Patricia. And as UN Global Pearls has been mainstreaming social inclusion and gender consideration in their innovations program to achieve SDG 5 gender equality. This was already into the chat box. Patricia, over to you.
Thank you. It's in short, the short answer to that is with a lot of intention and a lot of reminders to ourselves as well. So the core of what we do is around the SDGs. So from there, we support any innovation that would answer the SDGs. But for example, the Scale Accelerator, we ask specifically for innovations to apply if they cover well, one of them was gender diversity and inclusivity as well. And for example, Casper's Farm to Go covers that very thing, that very SDG in many ways. So that's one soft way of us to mainstream that. And I might also be borrowing Faisal's words in this, but it's also about your user-centric design. You need to keep your user in the middle of all of this to include them. And also speaking on behalf of another team that's working in the Finland office is the Foresight team works a lot with the participatory approach. So really getting voices from the ground, making sure they're included in a lot of our work is really important. And then finally, from a monitoring and evaluation side of things, we also need to make sure we're collecting gender aggregated data to make sure that we're actually including and being inclusive gender-wise, age-wise, it really depends on the project, but that's all the many ways that we have tried, and we're still learning of as we go on how we can include, be more inclusive from a social perspective and a gender perspective and every other perspective as well, and being diverse. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patricia. Now the next question, which is with Faisal, when he already explained into the DISA and social thematic tools. While it is already into the chat box. While reorganizing the value and positive impact of newly developed tools like the DISA SEM tool, we have noticed that UN agencies often create new products from scratch within project proposals to better fit intended interventions and attract more resources. Given this challenging situation, how can we better leverage these successfully tested innovative solutions? Over to you, Fazal.
Thank you. So I guess we are a big fan of how as much as possible we're sharing our knowledge. So within the office, we usually get invited to talk about the innovation projects that we've done and then how this project will be able to replicate. I think specifically to DISA part, I mean, the way how we've done it is basically we do quite a lot of documentations related to the process. We now even have what we call a blueprint, where we lay out the whole process from the beginning to the end. So starting from how we do user research, how we'll be able to understand the needs of the user, and how we'll be able to replicate this whole process when we move to the different countries. So this is something that we've done quite a lot when we do a project, especially for DISA. We have a huge teams that will be trying to do this whole documentation and all the selling, because to be able to replicate, like I mentioned in my presentation, I think we need to have the more effective way on how we'll be able to capturing all process that we've done. So in my case, to answer the question that we have, I think there's a lot of initiative innovations out there that you can easily access, not only the process, but sometimes the whole code even. So I mean, I've been in a lot of conversation with different organizations where they basically create something and make it available for everyone to use it or reuse the code. So this is in an open world. I think it's become more and more kind of a common one. The way how you implemented this and the way how you adapted within your localized context, I think this will be the things that you probably will need to challenge yourself, because ideally you will be understand better the context of your area, demographic, social, economy, and so on. But also, as much as possible, I think it's quite important also to understand that if you would like to leverage these new innovative solutions, like Patricia said, how ready your organization are, what kind of partners that you will be able to collaborate, what kind of advocacy policy engagement that you would like to engage in this type of process. So there's a lot of things out there. I think you will be able to successfully using this innovation solution, but but you also need to choose wisely, because sometimes, I mean, in the past we've done quite a lot of numbers of innovation and prototype projects using different type of data. In some of the cases, some of the prototype that we build, it looks really good, it's function really well, but the needs, when we try to discuss with different partners, we also understand that there's a different needs, there's a different type of the way how people would like to engage with different systems. So tailoring these things to your context within your partnership and collaboration network, I think it's one of the most important one, because there's a lot of out there that it's successfully probably in different contexts, but will not be easily adaptable to your context itself. So I think it's important to start to recognize these things and then try to figure out what kind of path and the pattern and the way how you would like to do these things. I think that's probably something that I would be able to answer from that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, the key takeaway in says that with the right technology that you have and the applicability of the innovations to changing and best suited to localization will make this more important. Once we have the right technology and adaptation to the localized scenario, the localized geographical scenario, I understand that the same innovation can be scaled up or a new innovations can be scaled up also, giving in these contexts. Thank you so much once again. With this, we come to the end part and we are also running short of time. So we will come to the closing. But before the closing, may I request all our audience who are present over here to switch on their videos so that we can take a beautiful photograph right from our laptops. I request my ICARE colleagues to take a nice photograph, to take two nice photographs. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. With this, I would like to thank all our guest speakers for their valuable contribution in today's webinar and by highlighting the key aspects of scaling the summit, how to expand promising ideas for a widespread impact. I'm equally thankful to all our esteemed innovators, government officials, researchers, and academia, private sector representatives, NGOs, and civil society organizations who have taken time out to join this webinar. I would like to also thank our UN Pulse Global colleague, Ms. Femi, who was already from here since the very beginning of starting this collaboration. And lastly, to all the audience who joined this webinar and to make it a great success. For more information, kindly contact or visit the ICAR website, and you can get more information on this. And if you like, you can get it through the mail as well. And the snapshot of all these that happened in today's webinar, we will be sharing with all, including our innovators and all the audience. Thank you so much. Thank you once again.
Bye-bye, everyone.